It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, your usually weekly breakdown of everything going on in Districts 1 and 2 in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. This guy is Ryan Scaggs. What's up? How you doing, Scaggs?
I'm doing well. I'm probably a little bit more rested than you are. Maybe you got some sleep finally this weekend after a busy Thursday, Friday stretch for you. So, I'm doing good.
Four state football championships in Holt Arena last week. It was pretty crazy. We did our live state football preview show last week. That was kind of the placeholder for the Prepcast last week. And then 2 weeks ago, I had every intention of doing the Prepcast, but this thing called life just got in the way, which it does sometimes.
It's funny how that happens.
I know, right? So it's been a couple of weeks. I know people are probably wondering, like, what the heck are you guys doing? Like, let's get it going.
Probably mostly Mr. Forsman's class at Kendrick High School is probably wondering more than anybody where we've been. So
right. So I've been dealing with some personal stuff where long story short, Ryan, I think most of our listeners know I live in Pocatello. I live over in East Idaho, but very soon I'm actually going to be moving to where you are, up in Coeur d'Alene, North Idaho.
Look how we glitched really hard right there. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're going to be headed up this way. That's pretty cool to finally have another colleague in the neighborhood. That was a really weird spot to freeze up too. That was super funny. But yeah, no, I'm pumped about that.
When people hear to this back, it's going to be like really a dramatic pause, and then it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't know. It glitched super hard on my end, and it like froze up and like slowed down. So I was like, I'm gonna wait just a second to see if this clears up. So, yeah, no, that's awesome to have you in the neighborhood, and we'll be able to probably do some more stuff here in North Idaho too, which would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So we're excited about that. But that's where I was 2 weeks ago. I was actually in Coeur d'Alene, helping my wife with her, job transfer and interview and all that good stuff. So anyways, we're back at it. We're going to be on the regular rotation now, weekly doing the breakdown. And so let's close the book on the fall sports season here, Ryan. 2 weeks ago, I wanted to talk about state swimming really quickly because it had just happened. It's now been a couple of weeks, but the teams from the north did well, like they always do. I think we got to start with the 5A girls and the Lake City Timberwolves, your 5A state champs with 260 points. Congratulations to the Lake City girls for winning the 5A swim title.
Yeah, that's a big feat to repeat. I mean, they were state champs last year with a good lineup. We knew there was a bunch of girls coming back, and the boys showed out really well too. I mean, they had a great finish as well, and so 5A swimming I think was pretty well represented by a few North Idaho schools. But Lake City girls, obviously kind of, I don't want to say coasted, but like definitely had a really great showing at the state swim meet, and 4A was super competitive as well.
Yeah, so Gabby Garaski, double winner for Lake City. She won the 100 butterfly and the 100 backstroke. She set a new state record in the butterfly with the time of 56.24 seconds. The previous record was 56.72 set by Brianna Ruark of Skyview last year.
Funny story about Gabby is that I used to work with her dad, and that was when she was in like grade school, and she was like super active in swimming and everything. And I was like, so is she good? He's like, oh yeah, she'll be a state champion. And I like just nonchalant kind of said it, like just like matter of factly. And sure enough, like, yeah, here she is like another year later, and some more state championships added to the mix.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So congratulations to Gabby Garaski of Lake City, double champ, and the Lake City girls, of course. Lake City boys took second overall. Boise ran away with the title. I mean, 300 and almost 400 points by the Boise boys. Nobody was catching them. Stephen Griffith of Lake City was your 500 freestyle champ. That's like the most rigorous event to me because you're going, 500 meters. That's a lot of upbacks.
Yeah, that's some distance there to do that. So, I would certainly probably tap out probably around the 200 mark, but to keep going that's a jaunt in the pool, and hats off to great showing from from these guys around here. These kids really put in the work, and I work out actually at the Croc Center, and so I see a lot of these teams practicing and just the effort that goes into.
Yep, for sure. I think Ryan glitched out again. So, yeah. So Stephen Griffith of Lake City wins the 500
I have
freestyle.
no idea what's going on with my internet right now.
It's all right. No worries. The Lake City girls also won the 200 freestyle relay. Sylvia Stroud, Demi Blaylock, Tristan Silf, and Quinn Taylor, the anchor there. And then at the 4A competition, the 4A girls, Sandpoint took third overall with 203 points. Skyview finished first at 209. BK was second at 208. Sandpoint third at 203. So only 6 points away from the title. Really close, really competitive 4A girls competition. And then for your 4A boys, Sandpoint won the 200 freestyle relay. McCoy Jensen, Kale Wright, Lon LeBlanc, and Caleb Norling with a time of 1:35:07. So congrats to all of our swimmers that went down and competed and represented North Idaho. A lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that was a great job. And once again, North Idaho shows up in the pool. That's for sure.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's close the book on football season as well. It's time for, I really should get like fancy music to play underneath this. It's time for another edition of the Scaggs Awards. Anyways.
I feel like the old NFL music. The dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Right. You did this during basketball season. You did it last year during football season. I call it the Scaggs Awards, but it's your All-North Idaho Football Team, and it is a robust group of individuals this year. It's a lot of good players.
Well, last year it was District 1 only. So this year, now that we've picked up District 2, I had to split between the two. And gosh, there's just too many good players to leave off this list. And so we try, and I even was very diligent in adding big school and small school kids. Like there's some guys at the lower levels that can play with the big boys too. And so this list is going to be pretty comprehensive and definitely, well-deserved and well-earned from a lot of these athletes.
Yeah, so we're going to go position by position here, give you the players that made the team, and then we've got some awards to hand out at the end as well.
Yep.
So let's start on the offensive side of the ball, Ryan, and we will start with your offensive lineman that made the All-North Idaho team. It's going to scroll across the bottom like the ESPN ticker here. So here's what we've got.
Sandpoint, Preston Jeffs of Lakeland, Carson Laybourne of Sandpoint, Logan Snar of Lewiston, Dallas Morgan of Kendrick, Miles Keeson of Post Falls, Brent Ludiker of Post Falls, and the cooler name of all the group, Taylor Winklecotter from Lakeland. Looking at this group right off the bat, I mean, it's kind of a who's who on the offensive front, I think, statewide. But I mean, just some dudes and some guys that I think, I saw them play against Skyline. I said that might be the best running offensive line in the state. And it's pretty evident. I mean, you saw them play against Skyline last year, but and then did you have the game where they played Pocatello too? Yeah. So you got to watch them play Pokey as well. And, that they were road graders up front. And then obviously we know Laybourne and Durrell, you saw them against Skyline in the semifinals, just a great group of guys. They work super hard. That senior tandem, they will be playing at the next level. Logan Snar, a guy from Lewiston, I think kind of flies under the radar. That he's just so consistent up front, a big kid. He works hard. He's getting looks at the next level too, especially at the FCS level. And a guy to keep your eyes on. I mean, he's just, somebody you have to account for in the offensive line. The two dudes from Post Falls, that was the group I looked at that, the guys that you'll see later in this group, and you'll see they were the bell cows up front as far as on the offensive front, but it helped, bust guys in the running game like Bustamante and Burns from Post Falls. They have to give the credit to the guys up front because that line did a great job this year for Post Falls with Keeson and Ludiker. And then the small school guy is a guy that you didn't get to see in the playoffs, but when you saw him in the regular season, he's just a dude that stands out, and that's Dallas Morgan. I don't care what level he plays at, he's starting. He would be a starter at the 5A level. He would be a starter at the 1A D2 level. He's just that kind of athlete. He's a big kid. He's 6'3", 255, just a good sized kid, but he works hard. He's got great movement. So definitely, I think a well-deserved spot for Dallas. He got hurt just before the playoff run, which I was hoping that he would be able to be back for the state championship game, and he just wasn't going to be able to go. So a great season from that group, and I think a very well-deserved group of gentlemen that need the kudos. That offensive line is, I mean, that'd be, if I had that as a coach, I'd be doing okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think my personal favorite from this group, obviously the two Sandpoint guys, but Preston Jeffs, the left tackle from Lakeland, big dude, really good at pile driving. And you can't go wrong with any of these guys.
I mean, he's a big guy, but he can move well. And that's something that you don't always see from a high school kid. And he just moves well in space, and he's aggressive as all get out.
Definitely. And so I've put these in by alphabetical order. It's not like, oh, the guy that's listed first is Wyland Durrell from Sandpoint. It's not that he's the best. They're all equally good. I just put them in alphabetical order. So that's how they're.
Yeah. No, they're all 1A, B, 1C, 1D. Like, they're all ones. Like, let's just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's move on to our next position here on offense. We'll go to the skill positions now. Let's take a look at the tight ends. 3 of them here. Pretty good. I guess I don't really need the ticker for 3 names, but it's going to do it anyway. So
yeah,
break
so
that.
Asher Bowie of Post Falls, James White of Lewiston, and Matthias McLean of Priest River. I mean, need we say more? Those 3 names, you look at the tight end position. It's obviously one of those ones that's kind of overlooked, I think, in high school football now. But guys that'll get mixed up in the blocking schemes. I mean, they block well. You'll see them run the ball once in a while, like kind of as an H-back. They'll flex, and then you can obviously see them in the passing game too. And those guys are game changers at the tight end position. And definitely, I think each individual person, you remove them from that spot on the team. And I think that, there's a difference. There's a definite hole, if I'm going to say that, in the lineup if you don't have those 3 guys in that spot. But I mean, look at guys like Asher Bowie had a great year. He was obviously first team Inland Empire League and well deserved. Matthias McLean, was going to play at the University of Idaho. He's just a freak show of an athlete, and a guy that just he shows up. Doesn't matter what side of the ball he's on. He's going to be making those huddle highlight films. And then James White, he's so multiple. You can put him flexed up anywhere on offense, and he's going to make a difference for you. So that definitely that group of 3 right there is. Not a lot of teams use a tight end, so like that's also another reason why there's only 3. But they're definitely the 3 most deserving, in my opinion.
Definitely. All right, let's move out to wideout then. Here are the wide receivers, and man, these are some dudes. These are some guys.
Yeah. So wide receiver, we've got Colby Luna of Kellogg. We know about him and leading the country in receiving yards. I mean, I didn't stutter when I said that, like leading the country in receiving yards. At least he was going into the postseason. So just a great career for the Kellogg player. Max Frank from Sandpoint. I mean, you could put him at wide receiver. You could put him at running back. It doesn't matter where you put him. I mean, heck, for all we know, we could see him at quarterback next year in some of the sets. Who knows if they're in a Wildcat, but just a freak of an athlete, great kid, works so dang hard. And he's a game changer for the Bulldogs and was a big reason in their run this year, so deep into the postseason. Trevor Hogley from Lake City, I think, is a kid that gets overlooked a little bit because of Zach Johnson being on the team too. But I mean, a big rangy kid. He's like 6'4", 6'5", can get up the field as a receiver. He's physical and go up and get the ball. He had a great game against Sandpoint when we had that game here on IdahoSports.com. Just one of those kids that you really like to see, and he's a definite downfield threat. Lucius Comas from Logos. I'm sorry, but when you have over 1,100 receiving yards, you make my all North Idaho team. Logos as an 8-man team aired it out quite a bit, but Comas had some gaudy stats. I mean, you look at receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He was, I think, in the top 5 in all 3 of those categories in 1A D1. Braden Rice from Lewiston. He had a great career. He's going to go to the University of Idaho next year as well. But just one session. You need some tough yards. You're going to throw him in the slot. You can put him down on the outside and stretch the field with him. He's just one of those dudes that you go after.
Yeah, that's again a pretty impressive group of guys at that wide receiver position. I think my favorite, obviously, Colby Luna of Kellogg, nationally ranked in receiving yardage. Braden Rice was a guy from Lewiston that I thought also was pretty impressive and got overshadowed at times by some of the other skill guys, but he was a big play threat.
They had so many weapons on that offensive team. It was like, take your pick. And so, you might see like them dominate for just a game or two, but they're just dudes. They have guys all over the field on that team.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Okay, let's go to the running backs now, and this is another loaded group headlined by two guys in the same backfield from Post Falls.
Yeah, so down the list, I've got John Cornish of Lakeland, Jay
Yeah, I think we lost Ryan again there. I think he glitched out. But you can see the running backs across the bottom if you're watching the video version of this on IdahoSports.com. Tevin Burns of Post Falls, Jake Bustamante of Post Falls. Of course, Burns infamously filled in for Bustamante in that game at the end of the regular season, and he scored 7 touchdowns in the one contest. John Cornish from Lakeland might be the fastest dude on this list. I don't know. We might have to line him up and see him race. Cleo Hensley, Bonners Ferry, Jackson Lathan of Lewiston. Ryan, you back with us? Oh, no. Still lagging. So, when I look at this list, Jackson Lathan is a guy we talked about a lot this year where I thought, Lewiston didn't get him the ball enough in the early going, and then they figured out pretty quickly that, hey, this guy's pretty dynamic. We should try to get him the ball as much as we can. And so for Lathan, he really came on as the season went along as well. Okay, Ryan, you back with us?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
You got me?
Yes.
Hopefully. Okay. I was listening to what you're saying. Like Lathan's a guy in Lewis in the backfield. I think, next year you could realistically look at, the two with him and Hottinger. The Bengals are not going anywhere anytime soon. Tevin Burns, you're going to have back next year for Post Falls as well. Cornish had an unbelievable career. And like you said, yeah, he's an absolute burner. He's a game changer at the running back position that, he's going to get his. And we kind of joked around before the season started that, that's a guy you got to watch for him because he's going to get a 50-yard run every game. And he does. I mean, I think it was all but one game this year. He had like a 50-yard carry. And then in the one game that he didn't, I think it was like 46. So, I mean, he was close enough. And then Cleo Hensley for the Badgers, I think is the one that gets overlooked a little bit for that Bonners Ferry team and what they did this year. He was a huge part of it, along him and Blake Rice. And, they were a great tandem in the backfield. It was like having two running backs. Obviously, one of them had to play quarterback, so Cleo ends up being the running. But yeah, just a great pair, and he had a great career for the Badgers and a great season. Obviously ending in that loss to Weezer, but all these guys are just deserving of the accolades of what comes out. And somebody that may have been overlooked, I don't know, but what he did in the championship game that you had was Sawyer Hewitt from Kendrick, I think, is another kid that maybe got overlooked, and you only have so many spots, but what he did in that championship game was just absolutely unbelievable of a performance. And so, that's another person that I'd like to mention. I don't have him on the list, but just another guy that's kind of floating around out there, only a sophomore for the Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, he's got plenty of time to make the list,
Yeah.
right? Only a sophomore. But yeah, very good group of running backs. Okay, before we get to the quarterbacks, you've got a special category here for athlete. These are guys that play tight end. Sometimes they play wide receiver. Sometimes they play in the slot. They play running back. Two guys here that really could play anywhere in the formation.
Yeah, Thomas Calder of Lakeland and Zach Johnson of Lake City. Zach Johnson is a game changer. I watched him, and in my opinion, I think pound for pound might be the best player in North Idaho. He's just a freak of an athlete. He's going to go play for the Vandals. But just he's a guy he's going to get his. Like we talked about it. We had that Sandpoint Lake City game. It's like well, where's Johnson lined up? Because they're just going to get him the ball and he's going to score a touchdown. Sure enough, they get him at wide receiver. They put him on the side. He gets like a 69-yard bomb. He plays on defense at middle linebacker and plays like his hair is on fire. He's just one of those guys that you love to see. Calder, we saw him at running back. We saw him running the fly sweep. We saw him in the passing game. That he was everywhere. And I mean, he got overshadowed because you have John Cornish running for 1,600 yards in a season, but Calder wasn't far behind that. I mean, he was right around 1,000 yards for the year as well. So just another one of those kids that, a great athlete and a great player for the Lakeland Hawks.
Yeah. And again, I would love to line all these guys up and have them race to see who really is the fastest, because Calder, Cornish, I mean, they're on the same team, of course, but all these guys really tremendous. And then finally our quarterbacks, these are all guys that can really spin the ball here. You did a nice job of getting big school, small school, medium-sized schools, a good sample here of QBs.
Yeah, I think I got one almost from every classification, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll start at the top. Parker Pettit from Sandpoint. I mean, what an unbelievable career for him and what he was able to do back-to-back state, a state semifinal game, back 2 state semifinal games in a state championship game as a starting quarterback of a varsity football team is an impressive resume. You look at, some of his accolades too. He's a 4.0 GPA kid with a 1520 SAT. I mean, he's brilliant in the classroom and just one of those guys that, the kids on the team want to play for, a guy like that. And as a coach, you want a kid like that as your quarterback because you can trust him. I mean, you put him back there and he's just going to will his way to victory. Drew Hottinger from Lewiston, you look at him and we got a chance to talk to him briefly during the Kendrick Castleford game. And he's just a good kid. I mean, he's just a nice kid that works so dang hard. You look at like his stature, he's your prototypical, like tall, like big, strong-armed quarterback, but he makes great decisions in the pocket. He's athletic. He can actually tuck and run too if he wants, but he can flat spin it when he throws the ball. And definitely one of those kids that we're going to keep an eye on next year. He's only a junior. Ripley Luna from Kellogg. I mean, what do you have to say? Like, you look at the connection that he had with his brother, with Colby, and you look at like Varick Meredith that was in the passing game as well. That, that Kellogg offense, when they were on. He definitely is deserving of his spot here on the list. Blake Rice from Bonners Ferry, a great leader. I mean, you just look at the kid, he wants to win. He's clamoring when the ball game was on the line. He was asking for the ball, and he was asking to put things away. Coach Hinthorn spoke very highly of Blake, and it's just one of those kids I know that they're going to miss. Once his time's done at Bonners Ferry, they're going to miss him. And but just a truly special athlete, but a great leader out there as well. And then Ty Kep from Kendrick, only a junior, but you look at the intangibles that he possesses at the 8-man level, it's rare that you have it, and it's rare that you have him for a kid like that, for another year. I mean, they're going to run this one back, I think, again next year. And my way too early prediction, but they're my way early favorite for the state championship again at the 1A D2 level, just with the tools and weapons he's got around him. And he's just a great kid, and he eats this podcast up. So he watches this thing religiously. So that too obviously earns him a spot in here. But I actually have a funny story about Ty. Was his teacher, Mr. Forsman, was in the booth as the public address announcer during the playoff games at Lewiston High School. And he's like, "Oh yeah, he watches you guys all the time." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, I mean, does he just eat up football?" He's like, "Oh yeah, he just, soaks up the game, and he's a student of the game. I'll catch him sometimes in class and like, who you watching, Ty?" And he's like, "I'm watching Weibo, Montana playing so-and-so," it's like, or Greno or somebody. And it's like, okay, like, I mean, he watches 8-man games from all across the country and just loves the game of football, and it shows up on the field. But just a great kid and a cool story about him.
Yeah, that's incredible. When you told me that, and I was like, that is so awesome, because there's some good 8-man football in Colorado and Texas and
Florida. You watch his games in Florida. I mean, it's cool.
That's where the new Lighthouse Christian coach came from. He came from Florida, where he won multiple championships down there running this spread offense. I think he figured out that the spread in Idaho doesn't really work, especially in the playoffs, but when it's cold. But there are a lot of good 8-man football. So that was a really cool story about Ty Kep. And that's our offensive players that made the North Idaho All-North Idaho Football Team, or as I like to call it, the Scaggs Awards. All right. you'll start to see on this defensive side of the ball, I had to start abbreviating a lot of the schools where these guys play because I'm limited to 200 characters. It's like Twitter. So because there were so many guys at every position that, and even some really good guys that got cut because really the strength up north this year, I think we would both agree, was on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. This defensive, it was this thing, like, I mean, trying to come up with it was so dang hard because there's kids that I know that are out there that aren't on this list. And I'm like, I kind of want to say, like, I'm sorry, but you can't put like 13 guys in one position. So there's some dudes out there that are deserving of their positions. But yeah, I mean, you look at North Idaho, and if I was a college coach, I'd be licking my chops watching film of these North Idaho teams because, one, there's big hitters, but two, it's just they play sound defensive football. And like some of these kids that we'll mention and everything, it's like, there's a bunch of guys on this list that are playing on Saturdays. A lot of guys.
Yes, and a couple of names you'll recognize from the offensive side of the ball as well. So let's start with the defensive linemen. I really hope you didn't freeze up again, Ryan, but here's our defensive linemen, and there was a lot of good ones here.
Yeah, so we got Matthias McLean from Priest River, Trevor Miller of Post Falls, Camden DeGraw of Coeur d'Alene, Robert Storm of Lewiston. I sound like the guy that does the OxyClean commercials, but wait, there's more. Because just that starting four, I start that list and you're like, holy smokes. And then you have Joel Possinger of Timberlake, Aaron Ivankovich of Coeur d'Alene, James White of Lewiston, Jose Laguna of Post Falls, and Hutton Hegbloom of Lakeland. That's an insane list. And if a lot of these guys aren't all state, I don't know what the voters are doing statewide, but this list is freaking psychotic when you look at the level of athletes that are on the field, just in this list alone. Matthias McLean is an absolute freak show game changer on the defensive side of the ball. If you watch his huddle film, he's launching guys, 5, 6, 7 yards, and he's sacking the quarterback. Him and Trevor Miller, I don't know if they necessarily know each other a ton well. They're going to be teammates at University of Idaho, but they could have had a competition for sacks on the year because it was like, whatever you can do, I can do better. Trevor Miller was an absolute monster at the defensive position. He was the IEL MVP as a defensive end. So when you're able to do something like that with the likes of guys like Drew Hottinger and Jackson Lathan and the other weapons, Jake Bustamante, in that conference, and you get MVP of the entire league playing on the edge, that's saying something. He's, a special type of athlete. Camden DeGraw from Coeur d'Alene and Ivankovich, that defensive front. I mean, Coeur d'Alene, you'll see some other names in there as well later in the list. But, that Coeur d'Alene defense was really good. It was just, I think the offensive struggles of that Vikings team was really tough to surmount, but they kept themselves in games with that defensive unit. And those two dudes had a lot to do with that. Robert Storm from Lewiston. If you were number 0 and you're on the defensive line, you better be able to back that up, and he definitely did with his play. Storm he's a good athlete. I mean, deceptively good athlete for as big as he is. I believe he did have an interception this year too on the defensive line. But just he's a game changer in the middle for that Bengals defense. Possinger from Timberlake was a guy that he was always in on the play. He's very gritty, very physical player for the Tigers, and what they're able to do defensively, I think, kind of hinges around what disruption he can cause up front. Look at James White. We said it earlier in the year. I think he's better on defense than he is at tight end, and he's a great tight end. I think he's just on the edge. He's a different type of. He's got an extra gear. And he's just a disruptor on the defensive line. And Jose Laguna was one of those guys that he's always around the ball. He's a wrestler. He's got great leverage. He's not the biggest guy, but he's always just in the mix. And, when you have to draw so many double teams on Trevor Miller like he got all year, Laguna feasted on the ability to get a lot of one-on-one matchups, and he won them. And he did a great job up front for the Trojans. And that defensive unit for Post Falls was so deceptively good all year long. And then Hutton Hegbloom for the Hawks, just a great kid, but, works so insanely hard up front and for that Lakeland team, and very deserving of his position. And he was, he had great linebacker play behind him as well. And, that did some favors for him and what he was able to do for Lakeland defensively.
Yeah, that is a great group of defensive linemen. I think obviously Robert Storm, or as you like to call him, Agent Zero for Lewiston, was a personal favorite of mine. The very first game of the year, I did Coeur d'Alene against Rigby, and Aaron Ivankovich really stood out to me as well. And then obviously McLean moving on to the D1 level, and then Trevor Miller. He had a game where he had like 6 sacks in one game or something like that.
Yeah, against Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
He had like 7 tackles
on.
for loss in a game. I mean, it's like he's getting season long stats in a game. Like, it's just unbelievable what he's able to do.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Linebacker was even more difficult. I don't even know who the best guy out of this group would be because they all are dudes. But take us through this group of linebackers.
Yeah, this list is psychotic. Like, I don't know how else to I'm trying to come up with an adjective to describe this, but you have Wes Benefield from Sandpoint. I mean, probably one of the better Mike linebackers to play in North Idaho in the last. I mean, obviously his brother Tag was probably equally as good as well. So I'm sure there's a little bit of competition on who had the better career. But Wes, just unbelievable job. He was an all-state linebacker last year for the Bulldogs, and I'm sure that he probably will end up on that list again this year. Cole Cripps from Post Falls was an absolute tackle machine. What if Trevor Miller ever missed a play, it was Cripps that was making it. Him and Gentry Smith in the middle for Post Falls were just awesome. Gentry Smith is also on this list. Those two tandem at linebacker, I think, were kind of it made that defense, I think, so versatile because they are great in the passing game too. But just against the run, I mean, like, gosh, good luck. I mean, what they were able to do, double-digit tackles every game. And I look back to that game against Lakeland, where it was just like a contest of, it was like, Cornish carry for 6, tackled by, Gentry Smith, or tackled by, and it was the same way going to the other side of the ball. It was like Hegbloom, or it was, you look at all the other linebackers that Lakeland had. Chase Burcham had a tackle. And it was just like, all right, gosh, you look at, I mean, an unstoppable force against the immovable object is basically what that defense was for most of the year for the Trojans. Varick Meredith for Kellogg, I believe, had almost 120 tackles this year for the Wildcats. That's just insane, gaudy numbers. And he was a great linebacker for Kellogg. Somebody I think gets overlooked a little bit because of the talent at the 4A and 5A level in North Idaho. But just a guy that plays so insanely hard. Shea Robertson was a newcomer to the Coeur d'Alene team. They're going to have him for another year, but I had to ask if this was actually true. Because he transferred from a school in California, and one of his teammates down there said, yeah, he had 200 tackles last year. And I'm like, no, he did not. And he's like, yeah, no, he did. And I'm like, show me the stat. And so it's like screenshot. And yeah, like, this dude is legit. And he played linebacker for the Vikings. And he's only a junior, and he's a freak. Like, I mean, he's a 3-star guy, and he's earned it. I think he gets kind of overlooked because Coeur d'Alene didn't have the best season. But if Coeur d'Alene was in the top of the IEL, everybody's talking about this kid because he plays so dang hard. Zach Johnson from Lake City, we already talked about him. He's the best guy on both sides of the ball on the field. He just plays with such a motor and plays fearless. Owen Wimmer from Sandpoint, that Sandpoint linebacker crew. I mean, you talked about it in the broadcast when you had them against Skyline, might be the best in the state. I would still stand on that. Like, that group of guys is just, they work so dang hard. And, really not having they have the best defensive front. I mean, they have a couple guys up front that are pretty good. I mean, you look at like Levi Ballison does a great job on the edge, but it's just, they have to make a ton of plays. And they do. And that's, why they have so many tackles. You look at both of them, I think we're over 80 for the year. But, they get tackles for loss or sacks. They don't get burned in coverage. They play consistently and play well. Gentry Smith from Post Falls, we already talked about with him, and Cole Cripps, just a great 1-2 punch at linebacker for the Trojans. Chase Burcham is a guy that, you look at the end of the game, he's the one that's covered in mud from head to toe. He's the one that's like, he's basically having to be carried off the field because he's just spent. He plays so hard and plays so fearless every game. He doesn't get the stats and accolades like the guys like John Cornish or or Thomas Calder, but he's every bit of the reason that the Hawks had success. I think Chase Burcham had a ton to do with that as well for Lakeland. And, he earns the accolades. And then Elliott Taylor from Lewiston is the one I look at in this list. And it's like, everybody's like, what do you forget about Elliott Taylor? He's a dog. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't forget him I had this like poll on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and I left him off because he's a lock, dude. The guy is so good at middle linebacker for the Bengals. That, this Lewiston team, I look at, they're just going to reload next year. They're dangerous. And the guys like Elliott and Hottinger and some of these other dudes, like, they've built up the guys around them and underneath of them as great leaders. And that Lewiston defense is going to be so, I don't think they're going to miss a beat next year necessarily. But Elliott Taylor, just a great job for Lewiston this year. And, hats off to him and what he did for the Bengals, because he had a phenomenal season.
Yeah. One little tidbit I always like to remind people of is that Zach Johnson and Varick Meredith were teammates at one point, right? Varick Meredith started at Lake City and more basketball, right? They both were in the starting lineup their sophomore years, and then Meredith moved to Kellogg. And so kind of a cool deal, though. And both those guys, of course, are going to be balling again this winter. So a lot of fun to watch them.
Yeah, no, there's some dudes out there that are, this is going to the wrestling. There's so many wrestlers on this list too, that are going to show up and make noise at state too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, those are the linebackers. Let's go to the DBs. This is another crowded group. What do you think here?
I mean, like, just looking at it right off the top, the ones that kind of stand out, like, I know there's some small school guys in here too that I think got overlooked but made some serious noise. But we'll start with Junius McGraw from Coeur d'Alene. Just a great DB for the Vikings. Had an awesome season, and looking forward to what he's able to grow into in that position. Ripley Luna, as good of a quarterback as he is, I think he's a better DB. I really do. People are going to be like, dude, you are psycho for saying that. His instincts in the secondary are insane. And he tracks the ball so well, and he covers well. He just doesn't get burned deep. He plays great in the secondary. And I mean, I told that to a couple of guys, and they're like, dude, are you smoking crack? I'm like, I'm telling you, go look at his stats and watch his film and watch his tape in the secondary. He's insane. Jack Zimmerman from Sandpoint, you could call him a linebacker, you could call him a DB. He plays kind of that hybrid strong safety joker type linebacker position, but I put him in the secondary because he does end up in coverage quite a bit, but just a heavy hitter. I mean, he's like, if you want a knockout blow from a guy in your secondary that's going to come up and absolutely rock somebody that needs to either make a stop or break up a pass, Jack Z he's all over that. And he's just one of those kids that plays insanely hard, plays insanely fast, and he's an insane great baseball player. But I mean, if he wanted to play at the next level in the secondary, to future there as well, especially maybe he might find his way to like getting some serious time on.
I think you were going to say special teams, but
yeah, froze up. There we go.
No, that's all right. Teams, but yeah. Okay. Two funny things here. Again, this was a crowded list. You'll see our little scroll of text along the bottom, 200 characters or less. I had to leave the T off of Sandpoint at the very end there. Because
they also have Zach Zimmerman, which would have been an awesome nickname.
I know, because it was a typo, obviously, but Jack Zimmerman really did play. It was almost like a rover position, right, where he could go cover a guy, but he would also walk up and play in the box as well.
And he'd blitz too. He would blitz and go hit the quarterback. Yeah, and so he's just a freak of a player, and just one of those kids that just you'd love to have, because he. And most of the Sandpoint kids are that way too, but they just hit so dang hard. Like, they just play hard till the end of the game. Like, he's one of those kids that he'll sit down when the game's over. Then it looks like he's finally breathing.
Right. Yeah. So maybe we can start that hype train, Zach Zimmerman, instead of Jack Zimmerman from Sandpoint. That's funny. Okay.
Jack Zimmerman hit a couple bombs in baseball. He's going to earn that Jack name too. So yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Let's go to the special teams. You picked 2 kickers / punters, and then 2 return guys as well here on special teams.
Yeah. So special kicker punter, Owen Forsman from Lakeland. He's only a junior. He's going to be playing on Saturdays. I can flat out tell you that right now. He's one of the best kickers in the area. He hit a 45-yard field goal in one of the games that I had this year. I think it was against Coeur d'Alene. Jacob Go from Sandpoint, just consistent in the kicking game. He was always there, and he could boot it a little bit in the punting game, but once in a while he'd get up and tee one off, and he, in kickoffs, that's a nice weapon to have if you're able to either hit the end zone, or if you're able to put one in the, a high sky kick and you need to kick it to like the 27 into that hole there. He's able to do that, and he's multiple as a kicker, and I think he earned my spot there. Return game, Jonas McGraw from Coeur d'Alene and Aiden Triana from Post Falls. Two dudes I don't want to see back there if I'm kicking off. Like, just the speed that's there, the skill set. They have video game like
lost you at the end there, but two things real quick about special teams. I was really looking forward to watching Owen Forsman kick when Lakeland played Pocatello in that playoff game, but they turned the ball over too many dang times. I never got to see it because they kept coughing it up on offense. But second thing is I would give a special shout out here to Blake Rice from Bonners Ferry as well. He's already on the team at multiple other positions, played quarterback, DB for them, but he was also a very underrated kicker this year for the Badgers.
Yeah,
I would say.
No, he was a serviceable kicker for Bonners Ferry as well, and he was a weapon. He had a couple game winners for Bonners Ferry as well. So, and then some of the guys obviously at DB that we skipped over, like the small school guys, Dave Clue of Camia and Jagger Hewitt from Kendrick are two guys that I would see, and then Summers and Craig from Post Falls. That, those are all guys that I would, if I'm any level, I would take them on my lineup. Absolutely.
Definitely. And now the guys that are coaching them. You've got three coaches here that made your All-North Idaho team. One gets offense, one gets defense, one gets special teams, I suppose. But I can't disagree with any of these guys.
Yeah, no, Blaine Bennett from Post Falls. I mean, the turnaround that team had this year, and what they were able to do getting their first title, that hats off to that entire staff. I think that's a staff award more than it's just Coach Bennett's award. That the group of guys, they work so dang hard. Travis Hinthorn at Bonners Ferry having an undefeated regular season and league title, hosting a playoff game. Like, just that whole mix of things was just kind of a magical, almost storybook season for that Bonners Ferry team. Obviously, they would love to have made it further in the playoffs. And then Zane Hobart at Kendrick. I know it's 1A D2, but I don't care what you're able to do with taking that many underclassmen. And it's like it starts the season with a stew, and at the end of the year, you end up with a fine Michelin star 5-course meal. That's what Coach Hobart's doing with that group of kids, and they're only going to get better. That's the scary part. And it starts a lot with what he's doing and getting those kids excited about the game of football and turning out, especially at the youth level. Like, that is, I mean, if I'm looking to hire a coach right now, Coach Hobart's, he's younger than I am. I'm as far as a motivator, that dude is an absolute motivator of people, and somebody that if I'm an AD somewhere, I'm pushing really hard to get that guy in my building.
Yeah, it's remarkable, the excitement that's pumping through that Kendrick community for sure. All right, now we get to the individual awards winners here. You posted these on Twitter last week, but maybe some of our audience didn't see these yet. Basically, you picked an offensive and defensive player of the year in every classification. So here we go. The Scaggs Award for 5A offensive.
Yeah, so offensive player of the year at 5A, Jake Bustamante of Post Falls. Need I say more? He's so good at running back, just a dynamic athlete. Defensive player of the year, Trevor Miller of Post Falls. To have two Trojans on this list says a lot about their season and what they've done, and just the careers they had. Two great athletes that will be probably playing at the next level. 4A was so hard. I could not separate these two kids, just because of the careers they had, but also the seasons that they had this year. John Cornish of Lakeland and Parker Pettit from Sandpoint. Neither of their teams, without these guys on their team, neither of these teams have the runs that they did and had the success that they would if they weren't on the field. So that's the reason why I had to split this award. Defensive player of the year at 4A, I've got Wes Benefield. I don't have to say more. Like, the dude, his play speaks for himself. And just a great player and a kid that works so insanely hard. I'm excited to see what's in his future. 3A offensive player of the year, Blake Rice from Bonners Ferry. Well-deserved, unbelievable leader. Doesn't matter where he's out on the field. He'll go into motion out of a wildcat and he'll catch a pass if he has to. Just one of those guys that works so dang hard, and his players around him rally around him. They reflect his play. Defensive player of the year is Charles Hensley from Bonners Ferry. Charles did a great job in the secondary for that Badgers team. Plays really, really hard, had a lot of pass breakups, some interceptions, but plays great against the run. He'll come up and make a few sticks, but he had the freak show play of the year where he stole the ball as Blake Rice held up the Wood River player going into the end zone. Charles Henley stole the ball at the half-yard line and returned it 49 yards, which eventually led to a Bonners Ferry touchdown. But just an insane play, and he plays so hard. Co-offensive player of the year, two-way. Colby and Ripley Luna, need we say more? Those two gentlemen, rewrote the record books for that Kellogg team and at the state level, and what they've done is just insane as far as offensive numbers. Two-way defensive player of the year, Matthias McLean. He's a freak. You go watch his huddle film, and you'll see why I put him as the defensive player of the year. It doesn't matter who he's playing; he just stands out. 1A D1 offensive player of the year. I have Terrell Ellenwood Jones of Lapway. Dynamic player on the field. The Wildcats don't get to the playoffs without him. He really willed his way to victory in a few of their tight games that they had. He took over in a tough conference. That's just a kid that I see, I'd love to have on my team. He's an athlete that he just wants to play, and he loves to win. And I think as a coach, that's what you want. The defensive player of the year, Dave Clute from Kamiah. Just a great player in the secondary for the Cubs. He's two-way guy, but just plays dang hard. And, we could talk about Colton O'Kane as well on that, for that Cub team, but both those guys just play so hard for Kamiah on a great season on their league championship. Offensive player that you 1A D2, need I say more? Ty Kep. Like, that kid spins it with the best of them. He runs it with the best of them. Doesn't make bonehead plays. He's just smart. He's savvy. Doesn't try to do more than what he's asked to do, but when he needs to make a big play, he does, and you saw it yourself on Friday night. He's a winner, and then the guys around him try to match his level. And if that's, as a coach, I'm begging for that at the quarterback position and as a leader. And the defensive player of the year, Jagger Hewitt from Kendrick as well. I had a game. He had 3 picks in the opening round, their quarterfinal round win against Camas County, but he's just everywhere on the defensive side of the ball. If you're like calling a game for Kendrick, that's a name that you almost feel like a broken record, because he's everywhere on the field, every stinking play. He's either making a block, he's either making a stop, he's blowing up a block, he's doing something on the field that's going to make a positive play for his team, and well-deserved defense. He's amazing in the secondary.
All great players. I can't argue with any of them. And what a tremendous batch of athletes from North Idaho. I love that you do this every year, Ryan, because you take the time to recognize like not just the Post Falls, Kendrick, the good teams, yada yada, but like, hey, this player from Coeur d'Alene, Shea Robertson, nobody talked about him all year long, and now we're going to give him the spotlight. The wide receiver from Logos. I mean, you do a tremendous job of shining the spotlight on the local athletes, and that's really what this podcast is all about. So thank you for all the hard work you put into that each year.
Thanks. No, it's my pleasure. And, I said when we started this Prepcast was like, this is going to be about the kids. And there's a bunch of kids that put in a ton of work, and they work insanely hard, and their parents and their communities are behind them. And those kids need the credit. Like, they need a spot to be seen and be acknowledged. And, it doesn't matter if you're the second string, swimmer, your cross country, football, whatever. if you're working hard, we're going to see it, and people recognize that in life and especially in athletics. And it's worth being noted.
Definitely. All right. Well, we will take the rest of the week off for the Thanksgiving holiday. Happy Thanksgiving, Ryan.
Happy Thanksgiving, and looking forward to having you venture up north soon. So
yeah, we're excited to make the move up north as well. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And next week we'll get back into the regular flow of things. Winter sports, girls basketball, off and running. 5A IEL, gonna be a slobber knocker again, no doubt about it.
Death, taxes, and Lapway girls basketball being really good.
You know, if it wasn't bad enough, Jordan McCormick Marks was the MVP of the 1A D1 state tournament last year. We voted on that at IdahoSports.com. Just a sophomore. Her younger sister, Jalen McCormick Marks, is there now. She's a freshman.
Oh boy.
So
yeah, that tandem, that team is, to say loaded is an understatement. So
yeah. Anyways, a lot of good girls back. We'll talk girls hoops next week. Boys hoops starts in about 2 weeks, and then wrestling right around the corner as well. We got some really cool, exciting things in the works for wrestling, Ryan, on IdahoSports.com. We are bringing back the individual rankings, the weekly rankings by weight class statewide. It's going to be so exciting to bring that back. So
love it.
It's going to be a lot of fun for all the wrestling fans out there as well. So, all right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hopefully you get to where you're going safely and then back home as well. And we'll see you next time on the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.